What is up, Saints fans? Welcome back inside another edition of Boo Crew Media's pregame show for the New Orleans Saints. Chris Vogel here with John Hendricks. It's a Monday night game. Saints have a chance to get to 4-5, which is a pretty good record in the NFC South with the way this season has gone, and we'll see what goes down. And as always, these pregame shows are sponsored by Neutral Vodka, real juice, professionally simple, tasty, and uncomplicated. Neutral, the official seltzer of Boo Crew Media. John, state of the NFC South is not looking too sharp right now. You have the Bucks at 4-5. They ended up winning, but still not that impressive of a game there with the way they look. The Falcons actually drop a game, which is probably the good news out of everything because in terms of the division, there wasn't much ground that the Saints lost, and then the Panthers falling now to 2-7. This isn't a game that I would say is must win in the sense of if the Saints are going to win this division, they got to beat the Ravens on Monday night. But man, this is a great opportunity for them to kind of climb up the standings tonight.
Yeah, I think that's just that. And the thing is, Baltimore comes in, they're only a 1.5 point favorite here, and so I think with this, really, if you beat Baltimore tonight, then you start getting way more believers on the bandwagon, right? That you say, okay, the Raiders game wasn't just a fluke; they put together a complete game. This is a winnable game, I would say, because the Ravens are down guys like Mark Andrews, Gus Edwards. Although I really like Isaiah Likely, I think he can be a factor in this game. But they're kind of banged up, so I think it's going to be a defensive slug match tonight. And the thing is, can they stop Lamar Jackson? How much can they isolate him? How much can they really affect that as far as the Ravens go? But look, division, it's kind of played how they needed it to, right? And again, you look at I think a lot of us think that, hey, when the Saints and Bucks play on Monday Night Football next month, that could be for the division. I don't know, because if things track, you could be playing Atlanta at home to take control of the division. So these games do matter because, again, you want to try to get back to 500 and try to build off of it because you got some more winnable games that are up on the schedule. I mean, you got Pittsburgh after this. You got, San Francisco and the Rams first, and then San Francisco and such. But it could fall in the Saints' lap. It just is a matter of execution and how they can come down to it. But you couldn't have asked almost for a better outcome given how Sunday transpired for the NFC South.
Yeah, and you mentioned, the Steelers and Rams games. After this, obviously tough for the Saints to kind of look ahead, but in terms of scheduling, it looks a lot easier now than it did back in September. You talked about, Mark Andrews is going to be out for this game. Gus Edwards is doubtful. Rashad Bateman out for the year. Those are three important weapons for the Ravens. But to your point, still got to worry about number 8 and Lamar Jackson. I was looking at it earlier this morning, 69.1 rushing yards per game for Lamar this season. He's been electric. I know the Saints at times have really struggled with rushing quarterbacks, and you look at last week's performance, just got after Derek Carr, whether it was Peyton Turner, Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport, Onyemata, they really got after him. It can't kind of be the same formula this week because Lamar is not someone you want to run straight at because he can make you miss and then cause damage. But in terms of confidence level in this defense, to be able to maybe contain Lamar and a injury-riddled offense, where's that at right now? Because obviously Lamar is one of the biggest game changers in the league.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of respect there. I mean, Ryan Nielsen was talking about it, and I think I go back to something he said a couple weeks ago. Just it's lane integrity, eye discipline. These are the types of things that you got to make sure that you're on point with when you talk about defending against a guy like Lamar Jackson. That passing game is going to have some problems, right? And again, I think they can find success, but look, it's going to be a lot of decisions where you're going to have to make for Lamar Jackson. And again, look, he's a guy that you can't just shut him out, right? I mean, that's just not likely. He's going to get some success on there. You're going to see guys that rush him and get close to him and just almost bring him down, and he gets away and ends up making a positive play out of it. Just how Lamar Jackson is. But let me tell you, I think this defense is playing with a lot of confidence right now. Look, you're not going to have Marshawn Lattimore back there, but look, Alontae Taylor is playing outstanding right now. Having a good secondary back there on the back end is going to work wonders for this team because, again, it starts up front, but those guys in the back, Taylor having the confidence, Adebo not being on the injury report is a big thing, obviously, too. Tyrann Mathieu playing a little bit better for sure, and Marcus May back there on the back end. And, we'll see if we get PJ Williams back in the mix today. We'll see how that works out. That could potentially help out in some dime situations if they need to go run to that. But presumably Chris Harris Jr. playing the slot. I thought he had a pretty good game last week and, has come a long way for this team. So, it's a lot of matchups that you're going to have to worry about, but it's going to depend heavily on those guys in the front in the trenches to get after Lamar and create some pressure. And again, he's an escape artist. He's somebody that you throw everything you can in the kitchen sink. He's going to find a way to do it, and he's very dangerous on the open field. So it's going to be a real interesting test how the Saints defense stacks up against him.
Yeah, and you talked about, the defensive line and the confidence they're playing with. If you had to give like an X factor on the defensive side of the football, or someone that needs to, this has to be the game where they play at their highest level, is it Tyrann Mathieu? Is it, Pete Werner, Demario Davis, because one of them may have to spy Lamar? What are you looking at in terms of defensively? He needs to be the driving force. Who would kind of be that X factor for you on that side of the ball?
I think it's Pete Werner. I just feel like that's the guy that, he's had a strong year and he's done so many good things for this defense. And for me, it's just one of those that, okay, Lamar gets to the second level, you can't let him get beyond that. And right. And so him and Demario Davis obviously have their work cut out for him today. But I think Werner is a guy that, his tackling is really where it's going to come to fruition here is where you really need him. So I think that's the guy that you look at. I think that, the defensive line, they can get things done. Look, Peyton Turner looked really good last week. And I think that we kind of just say, oh, well, I mean, it was just one game, right? But it's a big step for a guy that's a first round pick. And maybe he had his turn on the lights moment to come to Jesus, whatever you want to call it. But it was a good look for him, for a young player to get into the rotation over a Carl Granderson and be able to do things. So I think this front four can disrupt a bunch of things. But again, I don't expect him to completely put the clamps down on Lamar Jackson. That's just not realistic. So I think Pete Werner is the guy that you look at between Lamar Jackson and Isaiah Likely. I think that's another one, is whether they roll Pete on him or in the slot. I think those are two of those spots where big ask for Pete Werner today. I know he's going to have come up to the challenge, but that's where I would put my money on it, saying, hey, this is going to be a guy that makes a big difference here.
Yeah, and that's a great pick. And good morning to everyone who's listening. Obviously, the Who Dat Nation. It's a little bit early for everyone, but hey, Monday night, everyone's excited. So we'll see what happens. We talked about the defense. We'll switch it over to the offense. Alvin Kamara, obviously what he did last week, vintage AK, 3 touchdowns, over 150 yards from scrimmage, was just outstanding. He's really kind of taken on not just a leadership role, but really been the focal point of this offense. He's going to go up against a defense that, look, in terms of the passing game, the Ravens are towards the bottom of the league. They have not been great in that department. Run defense, though, in terms of total yards, top 5. I mean, we know it's going to be another heavy dose of AK. How confident are you in him, though, in terms of he's going up against a defense that's good against the run? They just added Roquan Smith, although I would imagine in terms of usage, you're not going to see him at his full potential because he's still kind of learning the playbook there in Baltimore. But how much of this game is going to ride on the shoulders of 41 on the offense?
Well, I think they're gonna lean heavily on him. And look, I expect Jordan Howard to be called up from the practice squad or elevated for sure to be able to help handle that load in the backfield. And look, success is gonna have to come in the trenches. You're gonna have to find a way to run the football, even though it's a tough ask. And they played against Roquan Smith before, and when he was with the Bears, so they know what kind of they're getting into, right? And the Ravens defense has been, off and on a little bit. There, times where you think they're should be better than what they are. And then sometimes they're missing Marcus Williams on the back end too. That's a big loss for them as well. But, look, I think that AK is going to get probably 20, 25 touches at least. I think Taysom Hill will be involved a good bit here. As far as it goes, I think the game plan of bullying in the trenches has worked for them and leaning on that ground game. They're really going to be tested. But look, you're going to take what you can get, whether it's a 3-yard run, a 5-yard run. I don't know if you'll see as many explosive plays, but AK out of the backfield, look, that's where it's most dangerous, right? Because it doesn't matter. And he was talking about it this week, just his vision and how he gets open and his confidence level and being able to do that, anticipating what the linebacker is going to be doing and then being able to get open because of that. And so I think that's really where the bread and butter will be for AK, is to get open and out of the backfield. They're going to try to get the run game established, try to mix it up a little bit with guys like Jordan Howard, maybe a little bit of Dwayne Washington sprinkled in, definitely some Taysom Hill stuff. But at any rate, I think Taysom would pass it a little bit more tonight, maybe from what we've seen. So I'll tell you one interesting wrinkle I saw in practice that I'm not saying will happen, but one of the things that I picked up on during practice is I saw them run an option play with Taysom Hill. I don't know if that's going to happen tonight, but a little interested to see that when they put stuff like that and we never see it in practice. I wonder if that's something that they're going to try to do to just mix some things up.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And I was actually going to get on the subject of Taysom Hill because you talked about establishing the run. And I think the Ravens historically are one of those teams. They like to set the tone. They're a physical club, and they've been that way for years. The Saints, and I think this shift has really happened especially in the Minnesota game. That's where you started seeing the line really start to move people. The Saints have been great in the ground game. I think they've done a great job of kind of playing at their pace, especially, I'd say over the last month or so. You mentioned Taysom Hill. 10 carries kind of seems to be a really solid number for him right now. With Mark Ingram out, it almost feels like in terms of usage, he's kind of been like the de facto RB2. I know that's technically not his usage or his term or his position, I'd say, but that's kind of what it's felt like. For Taysom Hill, you talked about that kind of new wrinkle. Do you think that's something that needs to be done in terms of keep defenses honest? Because I know, people could say, hey, sometimes you got to throw it. The flip side would be it seems like QB Power has been working so well for them. I'm curious, where do you stand on the whole Taysom Hill? How do you use him? Are you kind of with, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? You kind of think it's good to kind of mix in these plays that you talked about. And who knows if you're going to bring in an option play and mix it up, Monday night might be the spot to do it.
Yeah, look, Pete Carmichael, mad scientist, right? I think that's a guy that you look at that obviously can get a little bit creative in the play calling sheet. But look, I think there's a balance to be had. I think if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? It works. It's coming sometimes, and you still can't defend it. And it's all about Taysom and the vision and the lanes opening up, patience. All these things go into him having success. And even when it's coming, you can't stop it sometimes. And again, it's one of those that I remember the Bengals are like, oh, well, we're going to dare him to run because we're going to send more people in the box. And that's the time where he's like, all right, let's flip the script and Taysom throws the football, right? And so it's one of those that you can't overcommit to what you're doing against Taysom Hill. I think he's going to find success. If anything, get a little bit more on the touches department. And look, he's caught passes too and such. And it's just one of those that he plays football, right? I mean, but I think that they can get a little bit of creativity sprinkled in. I'm interested most in how they get in the red zone, the usage there. I think that's the biggest thing is that, we saw AK have a real strong game there, but they got to get, teams are going to pick up on it. You're going to watch film from last week and know, okay, the Saints like to run this. You got to mix up some wrinkles. You can't just say, let's go to the old well and keep doing the same things because those defenses are going to expect some of that. So, look, I would expect some small wrinkles to change a little bit there. But, look, Taysom's a weapon to use in this offense. I think just keep going with what you're doing. And, again, this game, I feel like it's going to come down to who gets to 24 or 27 first, because I just don't expect a ton of points in this one. And, even with Lamar Jackson on the other side, each team has their own problems or are going to have their own hurdles to climb. And I think the Saints, can come out and be able to establish some things on the run and open up the passing game. And I think it's where they can really find some success tonight.
A big story from this week, an unfortunate one, people talking about, Michael Thomas with going on IR, probably missing the rest of the year. And that is totally, devastating news in terms of wanting, MT back in this offense and seeing what he can do, especially with them kind of moving the ball at a better rate now than they did earlier this year. Jarvis Landry, on the other hand, did practice this week. And I know, a lot of you guys have kind of talked about, hey, even though he has practiced, if he does play, it may be limited. What are you expecting right now with Jarvis? It's not whether or not he plays because we don't know, but if he did play, you talk about, him being limited at practice. Is it, a lesser role for him this Monday night if he were to be active? Is that kind of where we'd be heading if he does suit up?
That's what I would anticipate if he does play, and I'd be surprised if he does kind of play. And again, I talked about this on the drive, but just to let everybody know, this is kind of the week. So we see him Wednesday. He's there for stretches. Then he runs off the field as we're kind of leaving and stuff. So he wasn't really, even though he's limited, again, because some people's like, well, he's limited in practice. He should play. That's not always the case. That's just look at the Saints injury report. It just doesn't happen. Thursday, saw him running some routes. But I just tell you, he just didn't look the same. Like, he just didn't look like he was getting out of his breaks comfortably. Didn't look like he was running at full speed. He made one hell of a catch. Like, he was going down the sideline. One hand is the ball behind him and then just tips it to himself, and one hand's it still. It's just he can catch. But, if he can't get free, that ankle is something that obviously I talked about it weeks ago. He was having trouble walking, and he had a big old, wrap or something cast around, let me not say that, more like a wrap around his ankle, and he was having difficulty walking. And so it was a setback for him. If he does play Friday, we saw him a little bit kind of working in a little bit of red zone. I think this is a 50-50 ball, but I just feel more pessimistic about him playing. And even if he does play and he's active, I don't think it's going to be a lot of looks. And, they have two roster slots open. One could be for PJ Williams. The other one, I would honestly expect Kevin White to be a guy that comes in here again, possibly. And so we'll see how it plays out, but I'm not so optimistic on Jarvis, just kind of given how his week has gone. But, look, Dennis said that, if something magically changed and he felt better Sunday, maybe we'll see him a little bit more and be a little bit more optimistic about his chances to play. But even so, I don't think they're in a situation where, you see what happened with Mike. I don't think there's a way to say, okay, let's roll Jarvis out there, even though he's not 100%, and just because we need him. Because, look, they found ways to move the football without him. Chris Olave's done great, but give him another week, let him get healthy, and then you can unleash him when he's 100%, because they need him more down the stretch than they need him right now on a Monday Night Football game in Week 9.
And if Jarvis Landry does miss this game, I think even if he were to play, and you talk about him being limited, so it might be the best thing to kind of sit him at least another week, let him get that ankle ready. Olave, Kamara, Taysom Hill, that's kind of where the offense has been running through, and should be. They've been great playmakers this season for the team. If we had a guy that needs to step up tonight, or maybe not even need to step up, but someone you feel like can in a game like this, whether it's the tight ends, whether it's Callaway, Traquan, Rashid Shaheed, where's your money at in terms of that? Because I actually, part of me was joking earlier this week, because it's just something, it's weird how great he's played sometimes in these spots. I would not be surprised if Traquan Smith ends up in the end zone tonight. It just feels like on Monday nights, for some weird reason, that's where he kind of plays his best football. If you were to pick one of those role players, Traquan, Callaway, maybe Troutman, Juwan Johnson, Rashid Shaheed, who's got to be that maybe fourth guy? Because we know where the offense is going to run through primarily, but there's going to be plays that might be designed, whether it's a deep shot to Shaheed, maybe something in the tight ends like a screen. Who's kind of that guy you're looking for to be the fourth important playmaker in this offense?
I think it's Troutman. I think that him and Dalton were having a pretty decent connection before and getting hurt and all this other stuff. And again, they have a playbook, and the way they use Troutman and his usage, I think that's a guy that really can get home in a lot of ways. And so, look, Shaheed's going to get some more usage, and obviously just because of how things have transpired. I mean, he wasn't a guy that was supposed to start, but, you don't have Deontay Hardy in the lineup, and Shaheed's done some big things and made some big plays for this team. I like Traquan. I mean, like you said, for whatever reason, he shows out on Monday Night Football, and I think that would probably be my leading candidate, right? Callaway's been kind of quiet a little bit, but I would expect with Troutman back in the lineup, him or Juwan Johnson, one of those tight ends, I feel like is going to have a little bit of success, because teams are going to really key on this Kamara matchup and try to, and I think that can put some stuff underneath, to Johnson or Troutman. I feel like they can get in the end zone at least a couple times between the two of them.
And, speaking of, Troutman and Dalton's connection, I'm thinking about Dalton and most of this season, and I know it's the word that people like to talk about, a calming presence, steady presence with Andy Dalton. Mm-hmm. The only real game where this offense, in terms of being super reckless with Dalton at quarterback, was the Cardinals game Thursday night, the 3 picks, 2 of them being returned for a touchdown. A lot of talk about that in terms of what he does on primetime historically. I know Andy Dalton's probably one of the more cool and collected guys in the NFL. When you guys speak to him, do you even get any sense of indication that it's something that kind of is on his mind when he goes into these primetime games? Because obviously it's a team game, and he's not the only one that deals with it. Kirk Cousins for years has dealt with, can he win on primetime? Has that been any discussion for Andy Dalton this week that you guys have had with him in the locker room?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that phases him on that. I don't think it's 0-12 on primetime. And look, here's another one. The Saints have never beat the Ravens at home. I mean, they're 5-2 or 2-5 in the all-time series. Baltimore is 5-2, obviously, but the Saints haven't won against the Ravens at home, which they've only had a handful of matchups. So, I mean, Dalton's due, I would tell you that much. And so, I don't know if it's just an added pressure or not. I mean, they're playing in the dome, so that's obviously a good thing. But look, he's played the Ravens plenty when he played for the Bengals and stuff. I mean, he understands it, I'm sure. But, it's not like he says, well, I'm 0-12, or I got to make these plays to make sure that I get a win. He's going to still be cool, calm, collected, Andy, and just be able to run this offense like normal. And look, hopefully he gets his primetime win and kind of gets that monkey off his back. But for whatever reason, of course, this is going to be one of the big talking points or big storylines of this game, when probably necessarily shouldn't. But, it's a Monday Night Football game in Week 9, and Dalton has a great opportunity to help this team get another win in the column and really set themselves up for interesting back half of the season. And so I feel like that, bet on Andy. I think he understands it, but he's not going to let his actions as a veteran quarterback in this league dictate how he goes in and maybe be more aggressive, because he's really trying to get a win. You know what I mean?
Yeah, certainly. And, last thing before we wrap this pregame show up, crowd Monday night should be electric. One of the better giveaways Saints fans are going to be able to have. I know people were raving about it for the last couple of days. Last week, you weren't afraid to talk about the confidence level, as you guys can see putting up the poster there, which looks sick. You talked about how going into that Raiders game, different confidence. You could tell in the locker room throughout the week. They were ready to show that they can start getting back in the win column. Where are you at? Has that kind of carried over to this week with the Monday night game? Does it feel the same way that swagger that the Saints played with on Sunday? Will that carry over to Monday night? Maybe not so much a prediction here for how the game goes, but how these guys are in the locker room right now. Does it feel like that confidence has kind of swung over to week 9?
I do. I mean, guys are happy in the locker room. And again, it's a lot of things going on, but confidence levels there. I think they understand what's at stake and what they need to do. Right. And, again, like I've talked about last week that, win doesn't solve everything, but it sure helps in the right direction to know that, hey, you respond positively to the message. You were able to put a win in the column in more or less everything showed up. So all three phases of the game clicked for them. I mean, with the exception of maybe the Lutz missed field goal, everything looked good. Right. And I think that's the biggest encouragement is that they know they can play their brand of football and be the team that we kind of expected them to. And look, I don't care if that team wasn't there for the first 8 weeks. I care about that team being there when they're trying to make a playoff push now until the end of the season. And so even they got, when you look at their schedule, things shape up where they could make a run here. It's going to depend on how they perform against Baltimore, because I think if they can get to Baltimore, and again, a lot of people aren't going to pick the Saints tonight. People are going to sleep on the Saints thinking that Baltimore is just going to run all over them, which I don't think that's going to happen. But, look, if they can steal this game from Baltimore, that means that's going to change the trajectory of the season. And I feel like that's the big thing here is that, they can put up the hard fought win. They respond like they did against the Raiders last week. Then I feel like we're in for a real shock tonight, but this could potentially springboard them for the rest of the year. And so I feel good about, the Saints team and where they're at from a locker room perspective, just getting the pulse of players and the confidence level in players. And look, it just matters. It's a matter of execution tonight. And so I think as long as they play their brand, don't turn the football over and limit the mental mistakes, that they'll be just fine. And so I feel like the pulse of that locker room is still a positive one, because they know that they're very much in this thing with the division, and that they know confidence wise that they put a product out last week that can be replicated. And obviously it changes week to week with your opponent. But, again, Raiders were picked in that game. Number 3 scoring offense. Devontae Adams was supposed to have a field day against the rookies or second-year guys and stuff. They didn't cross the 50 until late in the fourth quarter with a backup quarterback. That's encouraging, and that's what we kind of expected from this team beginning, and it's fine. Like I said, I'd rather that team show up now until the end of the year as opposed to the first 8 games that they've had.
Yeah, and to your point, as we wrap this thing up, Saints win today. If they do, 4-5 with 2 other teams in the NFC South, and all of a sudden it says take care of your business in the division when those games come up, and you might be hosting a playoff game later this season, which would be fun. We'll see what happens Monday night. Saints, Ravens. Saints are technically underdogs going into this one, but we'll see if they come out and get their first consecutive wins in the Dennis Allen era.